Hello everyone, Panzer J back with a new video. And as you can see, it's another familiar looking video. This is again on Historical Board Gaming Global War 39. This is game number 5 that we are playing. We are at the start of turn 4, so we've completed 3 full turns in the game. And we switched up a little bit as far as who had who as a partner and what sides we played on. This is the first time in the 5 games that we played that I actually had a partner. The previous 4, I did solo work, and I'm also on the side of the Allies this time, so that's a little different. I had played the Axis, I think, 3 of the previous 4 games. So it is in this game, it is me and the Incredible Falk taking on the role of the Allies, and then Agent 367 is the Axis powers. And as far as a further breakdown, I am the Russians, the United States, and China, both communist and national China, and the Incredible Falk is the British, Far East Command, and Anzac. So that's the lineup for the game. And we played yesterday. Again, we got through the first 3 turns of the game. It took quite a while, from probably about 9:30 till probably going on 4 o'clock. So what's that, 6.5 hours of gameplay just to get through the first three turns. So, but that's fairly typical, especially turn number 1. Both Germany and Japan, especially Germany, has a lot of things they've got to do, a lot of attacks they make. And in essence, on turn 1, they get to go twice with their second impulse, the Blitzkrieg rule. So that's not really surprising. I mean, I would say just Germany alone in turn 1 took over an hour. So things slowed down quite a bit after turn 1. You know, you're kind of settled in a little bit. You don't have as many attacks to make. But we got through the first 3 turns. So let's kind of take a look where we're at. I like how I have the Russians at this point. I think I've done some good things with them. If you've watched any of the previous videos that I've done on the gameplay, actually the Axis have lost the Allies have lost all 4 games that we've played prior to this one. And not only have they lost all 4, but when we specifically talk about Russia, they gotten their asses kicked every time. Moscow has fallen all 4 games. And they're really no one. I mean, I've been Russia once before. The Incredible Falk has, Agent 367 has. So basically, we've all had a kind of run at the Russians, and none of us have been able to make them a viable component of the Allies, honestly. Even some of the games where, again, the Allies have lost every game, but even the ones that were, pretty competitive, Russia always goes down in flames. So I was kind of eager to take on the role of the Russians just to see if I can, maybe do a few different things, make them a country that, actually, stays in the game for a while, maybe even in some later turns going on the offensive and start like really pushing back on the Germans. So I was anxious to have another run at the Russians and see what I could do there. So to start the game, Agent 367 did most of the usual German moves, took all of France. Now, the blue French units that you still see in France here in Normandy and in Marseille, those are Vichy. So they are aligned with the Germans. So those aren't still French units that are opposing the Germans. They're in collaboration with Germany. So he has all of France. He activated all of the Axis minor powers, Finland, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary. Took Holland, took Norway, took Denmark, took West Poland and Warsaw. And then with some of the Italian help, they've come down and they've taken all of Greece as well. Actually, as the Germans, he had taken out all of the Greek units, but then didn't have a ground unit to actually secure Greece. So then on Italy's turn that round, he went ahead as the Italians and moved in there. So Italy's got the money for Greece right now. So a lot of fairly typical moves. And he's done really well as Germany. I think he's accomplished some good things. If you kind of look in the Atlantic, there are no British ships minus this one sub over in the North and Central Atlantic. There is this big stack of British ships here at the mouth of the Med, but most of those have actually come from the Southern Atlantic. So he did really well as Germany, especially on turn one, to take out the British Navy. I believe he had taken out every British ship that starts the game by England and even over by Canada. So, and he even had some U-boats still left over. So he did really well with his German Navy to start. Also, he got some really good rolls when it came to rolling for the ships. Once France falls, or any neutral country, you take their capital, then you roll dice for the remaining territories and ships that are on the board. And those can either be scuttled and sunk. They can go towards the conquering power, which in that case would have been Germany, or they can go to the Allies. And if that's the case, they then escape to the nearest Allied port. So he got some really good rolls. As you can see down here in the Med, you've got 3 German destroyers down there. Now, you don't start the game with any German ships in the Mediterranean, and those ships didn't make their way from the North Atlantic either. Those were all ships that Germany got as a result of die rolls. So that was really good. He'd also gotten a couple other ships up here off of, I believe, Norway and France. So he got some really good rolls and was able to secure a handful of ships and really boost his Navy. So definitely some good luck there. And he's done fairly well in Southern Europe. Here, he secured all of the territory that he needed to, activated all the minor powers. So overall, Germany's had a pretty good run for the first 3 turns. He's built up some nice units here. He's got a stack of men in Paris to guard that. He's got a stack of men in Western Germany, some SS panzers and panzer grenadiers, some regular tanks and mechs, and a bunch of planes. He's also launched some bombing raids against London. London currently has $10 worth of damage on it, although he has suffered a couple of planes that were downed. So overall, I think he's done really well as Germany. One thing's kind of gone against him, which we'll get into in a minute here when we talk about Russia. But overall, good job for Agent 367 with Germany. If you're taking on the role, I mean, even just being Germany in this game is definitely can definitely be a little bit of a headache. Maybe not necessarily a headache, but just something that you've got to really be on your toes about. A lot of things that you've got to do, especially that first turn. And then you combine that with the fact that he's not just Germany, he's also taking on the role of Japan and Italy. And you really have to give him credit for what he's accomplished so far in the game. As far as what he's done with Italy, again, Italy's looking pretty good right now. They're collecting $29. And as you can see, the Med is completely swept of any Allied ships. Tobruk is still holding on here, although the Incredible Falk does have some stacks of men. But if you look at it, he's got the French Foreign Legion here at the back door to Tobruk. And then he's got a stack of about 8 men or so in Cairo, but that's it. He has no Air Force or mechanized unit in Northern Africa. So I think that Tobruk's going to hold on for quite a while here. And Agent 367 did build a factory last turn, so he's able to put units directly into Tobruk. So he's still holding on in North Africa. And again, the Med is completely swept of any Allied ship, so he's getting that bonus for Italy. He was able to take Greece, Corinth, and Crete, all part of Greece. All that is Italian right now. And he's got a nice navy in the Italian home waters itself. He's got a stack of destroyers, a couple of cruisers, a battleship, some subs, a decent air force. So Italy's looking pretty good right now. He does have to worry about this British fleet coming in through the Med. Italy also had taken Gibraltar on turn 1, so that was closed at one point, but then the Incredible Falk landed back and was able to take Gibraltar back, so now the Mediterranean is back open for the Allies to move through. As far as Japan goes, this is where I think he's kind of faltered a little bit. Japan, again, we're 3 turns in. I think Japan should probably be a little bit further along, but he had never played as the Japanese before. He had been Germany and Italy before when him and the Incredible Falk split up the Axis. But in that game, the Incredible Falk had played the Japanese. So this is the first time that he's ever even played as the Japanese. And again, when you're, controlling all 3 Axis countries, it's really a little bit of a monumental task. So he's still done fairly well. But if you look here, the Far East Command is still very much in the game. Both National China and the Communist Chinese up here, these pink units, purplish pink units, they're still in the game. Anzac is kind of bottled up into Australia, but there is a stack of subs ready to come out and cause a little bit of havoc. And there is a transport here with a couple of guys on it, so the Incredible Falk is starting to get some of these money islands for Anzac. But the major problem with Japan is that no one Allied power has been knocked out of the game yet. So he's got his hands full with both the National and Communist Chinese, the Far East Command, and Anzac. So definitely some issues for him right there. Not to mention that that the U.S. and the Russians aren't even in the game yet. So at least in terms of fighting the Japanese. So as you can see, for the Russians, I've consolidated a bunch of Russian troops here in Vladivostok, and I've left all the units that are in Novosibirsk to start the game. I've left all those units there. And my plan is, once Russia's at full production, even if he hasn't attacked me as the Japanese, I'm going to attack him as the Russians. So you're going to add, so not only does Japan already have its hands full, especially here in Asia, dealing with China and the Far East Command, but the Russians in another turn or maybe 2 at the most are going to be into the fight as well and going after the Japanese. So he's gonna have about 4 or 5 different Allied powers to deal with, and just look at the Asian continent itself. He's kind of getting backed up. I mean, a lot of these territories in China only have a single infantry, but still, I've got almost all of my Chinese original territories except for 1, and we're 3 turns into the game. I've even started moving into original Japanese territories up here with this single national Chinese guy and this stack of men and artillery from the Communist Chinese. So he really has his hands full just in Asia itself. I've started coming down here into Southeast Asia with this stack of Chinese infantry. I'm right at the doorstep to Siam with this major factory, and he only has a single man there right now. So he's definitely going to have to drop a bunch of units on this turn into Siam to guard against me taking Siam with my stack of Chinese there. And then the Incredible Falk has been using the Far East Command to good effect. He's got a stack of both tanks and men in Calcutta. Plus, he's also been using his navy to kind of do hit and run attacks. So they've been kind of little pinpricks, so to speak. Battles here and there to whittle away and whittle down the Japanese navy, but it's been effective. He's been, his navy's been sacrificed for it. He's only got this battleship, cruiser, and a destroyer left. but it's really been taking a toll on the Japanese Navy. If you look at the entire Pacific, there's not a lot of Japanese ships on the board. You know, down here by Sumatra, we've got a couple of cruisers, a couple of battleships, and a carrier. Over here by Borneo, a couple of more cruisers and destroyers, a couple of transports. And then up here off of Shanghai, you've got a couple of transports, a destroyer, and a cruiser. And that's it. There's no other Japanese units anywhere else in the Pacific. So you usually see the Japanese Navy a lot stronger at this point. There's a lot more ships in the water, and there isn't. And again, it's not even just his ships. It's the fact that he's getting bottled up in Asia. I mean, usually you're going to see China, if not completely under control, you're going to have the Chinese push back maybe all the way to Sichuan by this point. And like I said, you're already losing original Japanese territory. So I think Japan's is kind of in rough shape. We'll see if he can kind of bounce back here and get the Japanese rolling. I mean, they are collecting $56, which isn't bad in terms of money. You usually see them maybe a little bit more economically stronger than that, maybe in the 60s. But it's not even so much the money. It's just the fact that he hasn't eliminated any one allied power yet. They're all still in the game, and they're already all pushing back on him in Asia. So, and you combine that with his Japanese fleet being a little bit weaker than normal. And I mean, he's going to have to put most of his money into ground units. He's going to have to drop stuff into this major factory in Siam and this minor factory in Shanghai just to push back against what the Chinese and the Far East Command are doing. And that's obviously going to take away from what he can put into his Navy. So we'll see how that plays out for him. As far as how the Allies look, at least in terms of the countries I'm representing, like I said, getting back to Russia, I like what I've done with Russia. I've went ahead and pulled most of my units back from the border with Germany. I've got a single infantry in each of these territories. I'm doing that for a couple of reasons. First of all, on the turn that Germany attacks Russia, they get to pick one territory where all their units are +1 to the attack and all the Russian units are -1. So now he's only going to have territories that have a single man to choose from. So I'm not going to lose hardly anything. So there was no way I was going to stack a bunch of stuff up into a single territory and then have him pick that territory to do the surprise attack into. So I've got a single guy in pretty much all of the European Russian territories spread out. I've then got a big stack of about 15 infantry in Moscow. So I'm just basically waiting for the inevitable German attack. It's going to take him, even once he attacks Russia, probably about 3 turns to get to Moscow. And by then, I'll have probably another 15 or so men in there, along with a fortress I plan on putting down this turn 4. So it's going to be extremely difficult for him to take Moscow, I think. And some of the other good things I've done as Russia, I came down here with a tank from Novosibirsk and activated these pro-allied Iran. So that gave me $3 extra as Russia, plus puts me at the doorstep to the Middle East. Now, until Russia's at war, they can only move into, they can't attack. So this pro-Axis country of Iraq here, I can't move into until I'm actually at war, but I'll have these units at the doorstep, so I can start bringing them into the Middle East a little bit further. So that's good. And then the other big thing that I've done, and I made this concerted effort on my part, was up here in Finland. So Germany activates Finland, and Russia, without being at full production and being at war at large, they can go into Finland. And even if there's German units there, the Russians can attack Finland, even kill German units that are in Finland, and it's not a provocation of war between Germany and Russia. It's kind of like they can fight a proxy war, so to speak, in Finland. So, as usual, as is the norm, Germany did activate Finland on turn 1, and then I made an effort to use this major complex here in Karelia, next door to Finland, to build Russian units. I also brought a bunch of mechs and artillery that were spread out in Russia, and the entire Russian Air Force, which consists of 4 fighters and a tactical bomber, up here to Leningrad. And over the course of the last couple of turns, I've completely taken out Finland. So all of all of the both German and Finnish units have been totally killed off, and I own all 3 Finnish territories. So that's another $3 for Russia. So even with Russia not being at war, I've increased their territory / income by $6 right now. Not only that, but more importantly, I've completely taken out his northern attack route for when he does invade Russia. He has nothing left up here. He has no transports to come back into Finland to take it. So not only is Finland currently mine, I don't really see him being able to take it back, honestly. So I think Finland's going to be a permanent Russian territory. Like I said, that breaks off a northern part of his attack, which is huge. It got me some extra money as Russia. And not only that, but he does have Norway. He's got Narvik and Oslo, the 2 Norwegian territories, but he's got 2 infantry in Narvik and nothing in Oslo. So now, again, I can't go into Norway until Russia's at war, but once he attacks me, which I'm expecting this turn or at the latest the following turn, I'm going to take this force that's still left in Finland, which is a man, 2 mechs, 2 tanks, and 2 artillery, more than enough, and I'm going to sweep into Norway. So as soon as I'm at war with him, I'm going to go into Norway. That's another $2 I'll take off of him. But more importantly, with him not being in control of Norway anymore, he's not going to be entitled to one of his bonuses. It's a $5 bonus. So in essence, between the territory and the bonus, I'll be taking $7 a turn off of him by taking Norway, plus the $2 I gain for Russia. And again, he has no transports. He obviously could build some, but he's going to have his hands full with the U.S. and Britain. So no transports. He's not going to be able to get back into Norway or Finland. So I think those are going to be permanent Russian territories for this game. So I really like what's going on with Russia. And again, another thing I did with Russia over here is a lot of times I'll pull, or I'll see players pull all these units from Novosibirsk back into European Russia to beef up against the German invasion. Instead, I've made I thought of this right from the start. I was going to leave all the Russian units here in the Far East because I plan, again, once Russia is fully at war, I plan on attacking Japan as Russia. I might even start putting new units down at this major factory, Novosibirsk, to really give me an offensive punch as the Russians in the Far East. But even if I don't, just what's there, along with how well the rest of the Allies are doing, should be more than enough to maybe even take all of Asia, all of the Asian mainland back from Japan, or at least cause them enough problems that they're going to have to pump almost all their money into the Asian mainland. So I like what's going on with Russia. As far as the U.S. goes, I have went ahead and I lend-leased a couple of times to the Incredible Falk as the British. So I've sent $10 a turn each of the 3 turns, and 2 of the turns he received the full $10 that made it through. And then the last turn, actually, the money got sunk, so to speak. It's supposed to represent the U.S. Equipment and supplies making their way through the Atlantic to England. So in essence, the last lend-lease attempt I made was sunk somewhere in the Atlantic. So it went down to the bottom somewhere in the mid-Atlantic. But other than that, I've been actually completely building units in Washington and along the east coast of the United States. I brought a bunch of ships that start the game off on the west coast. I brought them over on turn 1, started bringing them over to the east, along with what I bought. So already, right now, sitting outside of New England, which has a naval base. So once the U.S. is at war, I could go 1, 2, 3, and land in either Bordeaux or Normandy on 1 turn. Because from a naval base, you get the extra movement to a total of 3. So I'm ready to land. And what I have right now is I've got 6 transports that can take 2 units each. So I've got 5 regular infantry, 1 marine, and 6 artillery. And I've got that backed up with a couple of carriers with a fighter and a tactical bomber each. So I got a little bit of air power going. And then I got a couple of cruisers, a couple of destroyers, and a couple of subs. And those 2 cruisers will be able to do shore bombard as well. So I've already got a nice U.S. Both fleet and landing force ready to go. So as soon as the U.S. is in the war, I'm going to be bringing all that over and landing here in Western Europe. And as you can see, he's got a stack of men in Paris, but as far as Bordeaux or Normandy go, not much. So I'm going to be able to land pretty much right away as the U.S. Other than that, the U.S. has basically left the Pacific completely. I pulled back. So off of the west coast here by San Francisco, I got a couple of cruisers, a couple of destroyers, and a couple of battleships. So actually not a bad fleet, honestly, especially if we zoom out here and take a look at the Pacific as a whole. Again, the Japanese Navy is not as strong as it usually is, and all of its Navy is really concentrated in the South Pacific. So even that decent U.S. fleet should be enough to cause some problems. But I haven't spent any money on the Pacific theater for the U.S. All of it is going towards the east in Europe to land in Europe and take on the Germans and the Italians right away as soon as the U.S. is in the war. So, and then that was again a strategy I decided to implement right from the start. Kind of just do a holding action in the Pacific. See how that plays out, but mostly go for Germany and Italy first. Obviously, that is what the Allies, the United States, did in World War II itself. It was a Germany first policy. And I think that is a smart policy to follow in this game as well. Like I said, the fact that Russia has not been able to survive any of the games we've played, that also really influenced me to do that. I need to get a second front, or me and my partner need to get a second front going in France to take away resources, take away units from Germany that they would have normally thrown at the Russians. So that's the strategy we're following, is kind of like a Germany first. As far as the Incredible Fault goes, he's done good. He definitely, in all the games we've played, he's definitely played the British, consistently played the British the best of any of us. He really gets a nice balance of, naval and ground units, and where to land, where to strike. He does a lot of bombing runs to affect the Axis economically. And again, he's got Britain looking pretty good here. The one thing, again, going back to what Agent 367 did, is you see no British ships in the mid to northern Atlantic. And that was because of how well Germany did on turn one to wipe out the British Navy around England itself. But other than that, things have gone good. He's got the Italians bottled up in Africa. He's got a nice fleet sitting at the mouth of the Med. And he's also been sending units to the Far East Command each turn, which has kept them still in the game and still very viable with the units they have in Calcutta. So, good job to the Incredible Falk when it comes to the British. And again, what he's done with the Far East Command, the kind of hit and run tactics on the Japanese Navy have really played out. So that's how things look militarily 3 turns in. As far as economically, we've got Germany at 53, Japan at 56, and Italy at 29. Britain right at 54, Russia at 54, China and Anzac at 13 each, Far East Command at 17, and the U.S. is at 80 at this point in the game. So that's another reason why I think overall, the Allies might actually finally be able to pull out a victory. I mean, economically, you've got Russia and Britain basically equaling Japan and Germany, and then you factor in the U.S. with their 80. I mean, already. I mean, at this point, the Axis should, because they start out so much stronger militarily, they really should have. They should really be, if not dominating economically, at least further along to make up for the fact that once the U.S. And to a lesser extent Russia get in the game, the tide starts to turn a little bit. And right now they're about even. So that leads me to believe that it's going to be an Allied victory. But who knows? I've been wrong before. And Agent 367 has been playing really well, so we'll see if he can maybe turn the tide here a little bit. Russia's at 37 and the U.S. at 69 as far as where they need to be to come into the game. So U.S. needs to be at 80, Russia at 48. So if not this turn 4, definitely at the latest turn 5, even without him attacking either of them, I should roll well enough to get both the U.S. and Russia into the game at that point. So that's where we stand 3 turns in. Hopefully within the week, get those guys back over here and get another day in. And if we do, we'll do another video, let you know how that turned out. Take care for now, and we'll see you soon. Hello everyone, Panzer J back with a new video. And as you can tell from the map here, this is again Global War 1939 from Historical Board Gaming. This is the conclusion to game number 5. Just a little bit of a recap as far as who played what. Myself and the Incredible Falk were the allies, and I took on the role of the Russians, the United States, and both Communist and National China. And the Incredible Falk was the United Kingdom, Far East Command, and Anzac. And then Agent 367 took on the role of the Axis powers, so Germany, Japan, and Italy. And as I said, we are at the conclusion of the game. Agent 367 and the Axis powers have surrendered. So, of the 5 games we've played, this is the first game that the Allies actually won. Up to this point, the Axis were 4-0. And several combinations of the 3 of us had taken on the role of the Allies before, so it wasn't just a certain player who was losing all the time as the Allies. We had each of the 3 of us had our turn at trying to come away with an Allied victory, and none of us were successful until this game here. So it took till the 5th game before the Allies could finally come out on top, but they have succeeded. And if we kind of take a look at Europe a little bit, you can see Germany is represented by the black units. The British are the yellow chips and the tan units, and then the yellow chips and yellow men are the Axis minor powers. Brown and kind of maroon color are the Russians, and then brown on brown over here are the Italians. And then the olive drab on green chips are the United States. So as you can see, Germany's kind of backed up here. Several German territories are now in Allied hands. The British have taken Western Germany, and I, as the United States, had taken Stettin on the last turn. So as far as Germany itself, the only units are in Berlin. So he's kind of cornered down into Berlin. He does still have units, a bunch of infantry in Paris and in Bordeaux. But that's it. Germany's really been crunched. They're down to $44. So Germany's kind of on its last legs. That went a long way towards Agent 367 deciding to throw in the towel. We were at the end of turn number 7. So not only has this been an Allied victory, but this has been the shortest game that we've had so far. It took 2 days, probably around 10 to 12, maybe 12 hours. Usually we're up to around turn 14, 15, even 16. Usually about 4 days worth, maybe upwards of 24 hours. So this was the shortest game as well. But not for lack of trying on Agent 367's part. He definitely put up a valiant effort. He had his hands full. He had never played as the Japanese before, so it was his first time as Japan. And that showed a little bit with some of his moves, or really his lack of maybe aggressiveness early in the game. He had been Germany and Italy once before when him and the Incredible Falk were on the winning side as the Axis, defeating me as the Allies. So he did have some experience as Germany and Italy, but no experience playing as Japan. So that showed a little bit. Also, I was actually really excited about playing as Russia because not only had the Allies lost all 4 games that we had played prior to this, but Russia specifically got crushed every time. The Germans easily ripped through the Russian front lines and made their way to Moscow and beyond all 4 games. So even in previous games where some of the Allies, such as the United States and the British, were still kind of holding on and still putting up a fight, the Russians got wiped out every time. So I was like, well, that's going to be quite a bit of a challenge to find a way to make Russia viable and actually, not just simply survive, but be a serious contributor to the Allied cause. So I was looking forward to playing as the Russians, and I think I succeeded. As you can take a look, if we zoom in a little bit here on Russia, you do not see really any German units. You've got a man down in the Crimea and a man over here by Romania, and that's it. And 2 German roundels on the board in terms of Russian territory. Everything else is Russian. There are no German units. Russia's got a bunch of guys, tanks, mechs, an air force up here by the Baltic states. All of Finland is Russia. All of Norway is Russian. And Russia's collecting $62. So they're actually second right now only to the United States. So I think I succeeded in my goal of, step 1 was making sure Russia wasn't defeated. And then, anything above that was kind of like gravy, seeing if I could really make them a strong partner in the Allied cause. And I think I did that. If the game would have really went on any longer, as you can kind of see here down in the Baltic states, down in Romania and Hungary and Bulgaria and the Balkans down here, there's really hardly any Axis units whatsoever. I was going to come through there and take all of southeastern Europe within the next couple turns. And then you look over here in Central Europe through Poland. I'm already in East Poland, and there's nothing in Warsaw. There's nothing in West Poland. Czechoslovakia is empty. So Russia was just going to continue through all the way to Berlin if the game would have continued much longer. As far as what I did with Russia kind of to do things different, the first thing is I wanted to go on the offensive as much as I could prior to Russia entering the general conflict. So you're able to go into Finland even before Russia's at full production and able to declare war in general. They can go into Finland, and they also can take pro-Allied countries such as Iran down here that aren't in Europe. So I came down, I took some territories down here in Iran, got some extra money, and I made a hard push right from the start into Finland. So my initial buys, I put all up here in Karelia at this factory and just pushed into Finland. And before Russia was even at their 48 production to be able to declare war, I had already had all of Finland under control. So not only is that $3 extra for the 3 Finnish territories, but now I've completely taken away the northern prong of his offensive when he eventually did come into Russia. He had nothing up in the north to come at me that way. So that was one less front I had to deal with as well. And then once Russia was actually at war and able to go into other countries besides Finland, I then went into Norway up here. And he, again, had like almost nothing left in Norway. So again, that's another $2 for the 2 Norwegian territories, not to mention that that is part of a $5 bonus Germany gets. So by taking Norway away, he had lost that $5 bonus as well. So I really kind of put him on his heels right from the start as Russia. And I like how that turned out, obviously. I think it was hard for him because obviously, none of these territories are connected to German land territory. So in order for Germany to get units up there, they've either got to drop Fallschirmjäger, their paratroopers, or they've got to use transports. So once I was able to take, out the Finnish units that were in Finland itself, it was really difficult for him to try to come back into Finland to regain that from me. So he was kind of in a little bit of a pickle in regards to that. As far as the United States, what I mostly did was, prior to their entry into the war, as you know, the United States has got to reach $80 in die rolls in order to actually enter the conflict, unless obviously they are attacked themselves. So for the first few turns, I wasn't in the conflict as the United States, so I just built up here on the East Coast in the United States. I bought a bunch of transports, a bunch of men, a bunch of artillery, and had that all massed outside of New England here so that when the United States did enter the war, I was already able to go 1, 2, 3 and land in France right away because I have the U.S. naval base over here, which allows my naval units to go 1 extra space, 3 instead of 2. So already, as soon as the U.S. turns that they're in the conflict, I'm able to land back in France with all those units, which I did. And if you look up here in Stettin, some of those units are still left because I then went over here from the coast of France up into Western Germany. I backed up the Incredible Folk's assault into Western Germany. So that's mostly what I wanted to concentrate on for the United States, is spending pretty much all the money they had on the East Coast, on the European side of the map, in anticipation of once they're in the conflict to immediately be able to land with a sizable force in France to take pressure off of Russia, which, as it turned out, Russia was more than holding their own. So I didn't even really need that second front in France, to be honest with you. Russia was doing fine just on their own. But it still kind of put the Germans in a little bit of a vice there. As far as the Incredible Falk, what he was doing in Europe, he played England. He, again, probably of the three of us, he has probably consistently played the United Kingdom the best. Although I got to give it to Agent 367, he did start out really strong with Germany. He took out pretty much every single British ship in the mid and North Atlantic up through around England itself. So that kind of like put England behind the 8 ball as far as their navy goes. That caused the Incredible Falk to spend most of his money in Africa. Africa, as you can see, Italy's pretty much wiped out now, but that was mostly just Agent 367 kind of throwing caution to the wind. He knew he was going to surrender at the end of this turn. So this really isn't indicative of how Africa looked for most of the game. It was kind of a back and forth. England was able to take most of the territories other than around Tobruk itself, but Agent 367 held on to Tobruk, and for most of the game had a sizable force there, tying down British units over here in Cairo. So again, it was kind of like a back and forth, each side building up. Neither one really strong enough to take out the other completely. So a little bit of a stalemate there. But then later in the game, the Incredible Falk did start building up transports. And as you can see here from this stack of guys in Western Germany, he started bringing men over. We had a bridgehead in Bordeaux for a while over here. We pulled out of there and went into Western Germany. But we were applying pressure to Germany from Western Europe as well. Then I had a second U.S. force that I had built up for transports, tanks, and men. And they were sitting over here off of the coast of New England again. And I had a couple of different options. Originally, when I built that force, I was thinking I was going to follow up with the force that I had already sent over here and just kind of a backup or maybe even land in a different French territory. But when I saw Italy getting a little bit weaker and having to spend more and more of their money in North Africa to combat what the Incredible Falk was doing as the British, I decided to send this U.S. fleet along with the transports of men down here. So they were making their way. Obviously, you can see they're in Gibraltar right now. They were about to make their way into the Mediterranean if the game would have continued, with hopes of landing somewhere in Italy, maybe even Rome itself. So with this U.S. fleet, I've got a couple of cruisers, a couple destroyers, a couple subs, and 2 loaded carriers. So that would have been more than a match for the Italian units, at least in this portion of the Med. There are some decent Italian ships outside of Cairo, but even still, I think I would have had the upper hand there. And that would have taken away the Italian $5 bonus of not having any Allied ships in the Med, because these were about to get there on the next turn. And then again, I could have been in position to land in Italy. That would have caused Agent 367 to start having to spend money on Italian ground units to beef up Rome. So I think both Berlin and Rome were in grave danger. I think if the Axis hadn't surrendered, you're probably talking maybe 2 more turns to quite possibly take both Berlin and Rome. So that's what the board looks like on the European side. Over here in the Pacific, it's kind of the same story. Japan's getting kind of bottled up a little bit. Again, you can't knock Agent 367 too much. This was his first time, again, playing as the Japanese. So I think not only for the Japanese, but for the Axis in general, you've got to be extremely aggressive to start the game. Russia and the United States obviously are neutral to start the game, so you don't have to deal with them. You've got much more military resources than the Allies to start the game. You've got to go hard and you got to go fast right from the start. Even if it means taking a few chances, you've got to be able to gain enough of a military and economic edge in the first, say, 4 turns, so that when the United States and the Russians do enter the game, you've already built up quite a bit of an advantage militarily and economically. And at least here in the Pacific, Agent 367 was kind of a little bit more conservative. The game before that, I was the Japanese, and I had come down from Japan and was in position on turn 2 to take out Calcutta, which I did. So I completely eliminated the Far East Command 2 turns into the game, in game number 4. He, as the Japanese, he kind of did a little bit of everything. He went into China a little bit and took a few territories there. He came down into the South Pacific and took a couple of the Money Islands. But he didn't press the military advantage he had at the beginning of the game hard enough and let all of the allies in the Pacific hang around. So as you can see here, if we look at the entire Pacific, you got the Far East Command here, you got Anzac down here, you've got National China, the green ships, and even the Communist Chinese here. All 4 initial Japanese adversaries when the game starts are still in the game at the end of turn 7. So, if that's your situation as Japan, it's going to be pretty much game over for you. So he didn't take out any one of the allies in the Pacific. So, and as you can see, everybody's kind of ganging up on Japan. You got the Far East Command with a major push down here outside of Siam and French Indochina. I even have the Chinese, the National Chinese, right on the doorstep of Shanghai. So probably the next turn, Shanghai was going to fall. Hong Kong has already been taken back. I've got both the Communist Chinese and even the Russians in Manchuria taking up all those original Japanese territories. So he's down to Shanghai, which does have some men, some tanks, and some planes, but that's going to fall on the next turn, or it would have if we would have continued. And then he does have a strong presence down here in Siam and French Indochina, but that's it. If you look at the rest of mainland Asia, including all of those original Japanese territories, which are yellow, they're all allied. So there's pretty much no way Japan's going to come out on top when the Asian continent looks like that. That's way too many allied roundels on the board for Japan to be able to survive for very long. He does have most of the Money Islands, although the Incredible Falk was coming back and picking up a couple here and there as the Australians. But he's pretty much in control of the South Pacific. But then we look over here, and you see the United States was building up. Again, as the United States, I spent probably almost all my money the first at least 4, maybe even 5 turns in Europe, with plans to deal with Germany first. But as the Russians continued to push the Germans back and the British were landing in Europe, the last couple turns I've been spending my money as the United States in the Pacific. So I've built up quite the fleet. In Hawaii here, we have 7 cruisers, 7 destroyers, 2 battleships, and a loaded carrier. And then just on the last turn, I just dropped 5 battleships, $100 worth of production off of San Francisco. So this fleet here combined, 7 each, cruisers, destroyers, battleships, and 1 loaded carrier, were about to make their way over to Japan. Now, he does have quite a bit of a fleet here himself. He's got 3 of the Yamato battleships, 2 regular battleships, about 3 destroyers, a couple of cruisers, and 1 carrier. So right now you might think it's about even, although I have 7 battleships coming. So I think the odds were in my favor. But even if they weren't, right now Japan is down to just $58, and the United States with bonuses is up to $102. So, just a little bit shy of doubling up what Japan is collecting. So I was going to be able to continue to pump out naval units like crazy, which would have been my strategy, to then make my way over to Japanese home waters, take out that fleet in a major naval battle, and then just kind of sit there in the Japanese waters so that if he built anything, I would immediately kill it off. And at the same time, I'd start building up transports and men over in San Francisco, and they would have been making their way over. So I think Japan of the 3 Axis countries was in the best shape, although I don't think they were probably going to last much more than another 3 or 4 turns if we would have went to full completion of the game, where in terms of the Allies needing to take possession of all 3 Axis capitals. Japan definitely would have lasted the longest of the 3, but I think it was inevitable that they fall as well. So that's kind of how the map looks. Again, it was a good game. It was nice to see that the Allies can actually pull out a victory here. I was starting to think that it was almost an impossibility to get an Allied win out of this game. So that was good to see. And everybody played well. I know Agent 367 kind of beat himself up a little bit over the game. Not only did he lose, but I know he commented on how it only took 7 turns to be defeated. But again, it was his first time playing as Japan, and his first time being alone in general. The 2 previous games that we've played, I was actually alone both times, once as the Allies and once as the Axis. So not only was his first time as Japan, but his first time being alone and having to manage 3 countries. So not an easy task at all. So I definitely applaud his effort. Nothing to be ashamed about there. And for the next game, we've already picked our sides and picked the countries we're going to represent. The Incredible Falk for the next game is going to be alone, and he's going to take on the role of the 3 Axis powers, and then myself and Agent 367 are going to go ahead and play as the Allies. And again, I'm going to be the United States, the Russians, National and Communist China, and Agent 367 is going to be the United Kingdom, Far East Command, Anzac, and I guess you can say he's also going to be France too. What's left of them, they obviously take a beating right from the start. There's no scenario really in which France is a viable country. They're defeated on Germany's first turn, and if by some miracle they survive past the first turn, then the Axis might as well call it a game already, because there's no way they're going to win if Paris doesn't fall on turn 1. But anyways, those are going to be the sides. So we'll see how things turn out. Hope you enjoyed this video. This was game number 5, and we'll get back to you when we're into game number 6.